The purpose of today's lesson is to look at how cell membranes allow substances like water, sugar, salt, etc. to flow through their cell membranes. And this happens by a process called osmosis and diffusion. And there are two experiments that we can do to check how this works. One of them requires us to take 2 eggs, and these are things you can do at home too. So you can take 2 eggs and vinegar, and the first thing you have to do is allow the shell to come off the egg. So what I'm going to do is place the eggs into these beakers, and then I'm going to put some vinegar into the beaker with them, and the vinegar will react with the calcium carbonate shell and cause the shell to come off. Now you're going to have to leave them in the vinegar for about 2 or 3 days to do that, for that to happen. So I'm going to just put these in here. You can already see little bubbles of gases coming off the side of the eggs. And in a couple of days, that eggshell should have come off the eggs, and we should be left with the skin layer underneath. The skin layer underneath is actually the cell membrane. The eggs are just one big cell. And so I'm just going to leave those to react with the vinegar, let the cells come off. I'll come back and check them over the next couple of days and see if we can get the egg shell off. The other thing that you can use to show this is this fancy piece of tubing here called dialysis tubing. And so, and if you know anyone whose kidneys are failing or need for some reason to go onto dialysis tubing to have their kidneys, this is similar to what they use in hospitals. It's not the same stuff. They have a big fancy machine, but the idea is the same. They can use this semi-permeable membrane to help clean out the bad products. So what I'm going to do is to cut 2 pieces of this dialysis tubing, and I'm going to soak it in water overnight just to make it easier to use. So I'm going to take these 2 pieces of dialysis tubing, cut them. I will tie them up at the ends eventually. So I'm going to put them in this beaker here, and I'm going to place some cold water into them. And I will let the eggs and the dialysis tubing soak. So I'm just going to pour that in there. So you can see on top of the eggs, as you look down, that they are reacting, the surface is reacting with the eggs. The thing when you're doing this, you don't want to let the eggs go too far. You don't want to let the cell membrane be sitting in the eggs for an extended. So you do, in the end, have to keep a very close eye on them. And the other thing you can do is take a potato, peel the potato, and cut it into sections. And I'll talk more about that when I set these experiments up. But this is the first thing. Just get 2 eggs, let them sit in vinegar for a couple of days until you get down to the cell membrane. you will not have dialysis tubing, but you do have potatoes, and they... So, have you started?
Yeah.
Right, so this is just following on from the work on osmosis and diffusion. So we're talking about the cell membrane being a semi-permeable membrane that allows, what that means is it allows certain things through and it doesn't allow other things through. And yesterday I started this experiment that you can do at home by just taking 2 raw eggs, placing them in vinegar and leaving them overnight. And as you can see, this egg in particular, the eggshell has almost disappeared completely from it. And on this one, it's getting to that point. I'm going to have to put them back into the vinegar to let the shell come off completely. But this is a semi-permeable membrane. So this is what's going to regulate the exit and entrance of materials into the inside of this egg. But I'm going to put those back in here. And you can do this at home, and I'll show you the last piece of that later. Right. The other thing you can do at home is just take some potatoes and you can peel them. And what you will do then is expose a whole bunch of cells, potato cells. And most cells are about 70% water, with a few other bits and pieces chucked in there. Potatoes are high in starch, so they've got all their cells will have starch in them, plus other minerals. So once you've got the potato peeling off, what you have to do is just cut them into 1 by 1 by 1 centimeter cubes. And I'll only do 4 cubes today. It's probably better to do maybe 2 cubes per container that you're going to put them in. Right, so now that I've got all the skin off and I've exposed the cells, I'm going to just rinse it off in water. And then I'm going to chop it. So I'm going to chop it there, and I'm going to approximate 1 centimeter and 1 centimeter. Then I'm going to cut these into a square, and then I'm going to cut that down the center. If you were doing this for an experiment, you would have to mass the potato cubes that you've made. So I've got 4 potato cubes. I'll actually do another 4 potato cubes out of this one. And as you can see to the side of me, I've got 4 beakers set up, 3 of which have already got salt in them, and 1 has not. This beaker's got 5 grams of salt in it. This one has 10 grams of salt in it, and this has 15 grams of salt, and that has none. So what I'm going to do now is to put pure water into each one of these. Oh, I should have measured it. I'm going to put 100 mils of water into each one of these containers, because this will be a 5% salt solution. The next one will be a 10% salt solution, and the final one will be a 15% salt solution. And of course the first one is a 0% salt solution. So they are, and of course if we were doing this as a fair test, we'd take a little bit more care about setting these up. I'm going to stir these salt solutions, make sure they are dissolved a little bit. And I'm going to then place 2 potato cubes into each one, and I'm going to leave them sitting there overnight, and we'll come back and examine them. And I want you to think about what you would expect to see happen here. So what are the changes that are going to happen? Why are they going to happen based on the Google Classroom or the Google Classroom lesson that you're working on? The other thing that I can do is take this very fancy tubing called dialysis tubing, and I showed you that yesterday too as I cut it up, but here it is. It's been soaking overnight, and I'm going to now add water to each one of these dialysis tubes. As I said the other day in the first video, you will see dialysis tubing, a much more sophisticated form of this, in dialysis apparatus in hospitals when people are having their kidneys flushed and stuff like that. So I'm going to take this deionized water, I'm just going to add it to the top of this. I've tied the bottom off now. I'm just going to add the water in here. Now, dialysis tubing is a semi-permeable membrane. It truly is semi-permeable. So it will allow water to flow through it, but it will not allow things like salt to flow through it. And what I'm going to do now is tie the top of that off. I'm actually going to use some cotton to tie the top, if I can find the end of it. Do that for the time being. Right. And I'm going to place some deionized water in this beaker here. And I'm just going to stand that in there overnight, like so. I will tie it off properly in a moment. The other one, I'm going to also put 100 mils of deionized water in, or fill it up with deionized water, and I'll tie its top off as well. But I'm going to place this in a 20% salt solution. Now, just before I finish the video for today, I'm going to talk about the terms hypotonic, isotonic, and hypertonic. So hypotonic and hypertonic can only be used when you're talking about when you're comparing concentrations of salt dissolved in solutions. So here I've got a 20% salt solution, and here I've got a 0% salt solution. Because this has got more water in it, it's hypotonic compared to the salt solution. So the water in the dialysis tubing is hypotonic, the water in the salt is hypertonic, so I'm placing the hypotonic into the hypertonic, and we want to see what's going to happen as they are left there overnight. In this case here, because there's water, distilled water in both, they are isotonic. There's no difference in the salt concentration. They have the same salt concentration. So we'll leave those overnight, we'll leave the potatoes overnight, and what I'm going to do with the eggs is exactly the same as I've done with the dialysis tubing. When the eggshell has come off completely, I'm going to take them out of here, I'm going to place one in just pure water, and in that case the insides of the eggs will be hypertonic to the water, and I'm just going to place one in a 20% salt solution, and we'll see which is the because it may be that the egg's still hypertonic, it might be that the salt solution is hypertonic.